Happy Friday! We have made it through another week, and I have another Houndsley and Catina book, and this one is called Houndsley and Catina and the Quiet Time. It is by James Howe, and it is illustrated by Marie-Louise. Now, I love reading books that I've never read before. I've actually never read this Houndsley and Catina and the Quiet Time. But I really enjoyed the other Houndsley and Catina books, so I wanted to read this one to you as well. I think their friendship is just so special, and I want to find out what happens. We have 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is called Silent White. It was the first snow of the winter. Houndsley gazed out his window at the silent white falling everywhere. The world had no shadows, only white on white on white. It is the quiet time, Houndsley said in his soft as a rose petal voice. Catina listened. It's too quiet, she said. Oh, said Houndsley, but that is why this is my favorite time of year. In the quiet time, everything stops. I think we may be snowed in. Snowed in? Catina cried, jumping up to join Houndsley at the window. But this is terrible. What about the concert tonight? I was going to get my whiskers curled and buy a new dress, and we're in charge of refreshments. We have all day to bake cookies, Houndsley said. Your whiskers look fine just the way they are, and you have plenty of dresses you can wear. The stores might not even be open today. It's a storm, Catina. There's nothing to do but enjoy it. Isn't it beautiful? A storm isn't beautiful, Catina replied. A storm means not being able to do all the things we had planned on doing. Oh, no. What is it? Houndsley asked. What if we can't have our concert? We've been practicing for months. What will be, Houndsley told his friend. Let's enjoy the day. We can still practice, and if there is a concert tonight, we will be ready for it. Wow, I really liked when Houndsley said, a storm means not being able to do all the things we had planned on doing. And that reminds me of right now. We had so many plans for the end of 2nd grade and for finishing strong. And those plans were put on hold. And while we're still apart, we can still be that community of 2nd grade graders and 2nd grade families. And even though it's really hard because we love 2nd grade and we're practicing our reading and our writing and our math, we can still do that at home. And I like Houndsley's attitude. Let's enjoy the day and we can still practice and we'll be ready for it. Houndsley returned to his cello. Catina picked up her clarinet. Before they began to play, Houndsley said, Listen, Catina, can you hear it? Hear what? The quiet. It is almost like music. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the house next door. Houndsley's neighbor Bert was practicing for his part in the concert. Bert played the cymbals. Houndsley, said Catina, I do not think Bert understands about the quiet time. Chapter 2 is called The Island. The snow kept falling. All morning, Catina fretted about her plans for the day. All morning, Houndsley told her not to fret. This reminds me of one of those lessons that Mrs. Pepke talked to us about how we can control what we can control, and sometimes we can't control what's all around us. So worrying about it as much as we want to worry is actually going to hurt ourselves because we're going to worry so much. So we can control what we can control, and that's what Houndsley is doing. Finally, Houndsley said, "Let's pretend that we are on an island. We can't go anywhere. Let's see. What do we have on the island with us?" "I don't suppose we have a whisker curler, do we?" asked Catina. "No, but we have books," said Houndsley. He pulled a book from the shelf and sat down on the sofa, patting the cushion next to him. "Let's read poems to each other. I'll start." Houndsley is such a good friend, helping Catina feel better about the date, even though her plans are a little rocky right now. We don't know if they're going to happen. At first, Catina had a hard time paying attention. She looked out the window and wished that the snow would stop. But when it was her turn to read, she found a poem that made her laugh. And then Houndsley read a poem that made her cry. "I'm not a very good writer," she told Houndsley after they had read for a while longer, "but it might be fun to write poems, even bad ones." "I think there may be paper and pencils on this island," said Houndsley. For a long time, the two friends wrote poems and read them to each other. "I'm sleepy," said Catina. "My brain is tired." "Why don't you take a nap while I fix lunch?" Houndsley suggested. "Good idea," said Catina with a yawn. Now, is Houndsley actually going to fix the lunch, like with tools? No. To fix something could mean like to fix something with tools, or if Houndsley's fixing lunch, that means he's going to go make lunch. After lunch, Houndsley and Catina baked cookies. They played board games because there were board games on the island too. Wow, they're finding some really good ways to stay busy. Writing poems, baking cookies, playing board games. There were also logs on their island. Houndsley and Catina built a fire and talked about what they saw in the flames. And then they grew still and didn't talk at all. At last, Catina said, "I think there are dreams on this island." "What do you mean?" Houndsley asked. "Oh, I was just dreaming about all the things I would like to do someday, and then I thought about dreaming about them is almost as good as doing them." Houndsley nodded. "Sometimes dreaming is even better than making plans," he said. Now, I know there are some things that I'm dreaming and wishing to do right now, so maybe I could make a plan or dream about those things. Soon it was late afternoon. The house was growing cold. "We need more logs," said Houndsley. "I will climb out a window to get some." "I can't open my doors because of all the snow." "I will go with you," Catina said, venturing out into the snow. Houndsley and Catina almost forgot about getting the logs. They were too busy building snow creatures and making snow angels and catching snowflakes on their tongues. A sudden crash sent them scrambling to get their logs and climb back inside. It's a good way to have fun in the snow, don't you think? As Houndsley rebuilt the fire, Catina returned from the kitchen with a pot of ginger tea. Another crash was heard. "On the island next door," Catina said, "there are symbols." Oh, sitting by the fire seems so relaxing. Chapter 3 is called The Concert. Ooh, I wonder if they're going to have the concert or not. The sound of cymbals crashing was replaced by the sound of a shovel scraping against the sidewalk in front of Houndsley's house. "Houndsley, Catina," cried Bert, "it's time for the concert." Houndsley and Catina looked out to see their friends and neighbors trudging through the snow with their instruments. "But I have to go to my house and change my clothes," said Catina. "No one will see a fancy dress under a coat," said Houndsley. "Besides, a concert is for listening, not for looking." Houndsley handed Catina her coat and a pair of snowshoes. I have been practicing all day, said Bert excitedly to his friends as they slowly made their way through the snow. Houndsley and Catina smiled at each other and said nothing. I am sad that we have left our island, Catina whispered to Houndsley as they joined the others at the light-strung gazebo in the park. I like the quiet time. Houndsley nodded. I was looking forward to this concert, he said, but it seems a shame to make noise tonight, even if the noise is music. As the musicians took their places in the gazebo, a small audience gathered. The houses around the park had their windows open so that those inside could listen too. Can you see the gazebo way up there? Without saying a word, the musicians picked up their instruments and began to play so softly that the notes fell on the listening ears like snowflakes on waiting tongues, gently, softly, there for a flicker before melting away. Listen to all that literary language. Do you hear how the author described the music? Let me read it one more time. Without saying a word, the musicians picked up their instruments and began to play so softly that the notes fell on the listening ears like snowflakes on waiting tongues. Gently, softly, there for a flicker before melting away. That author did an amazing job with language. Houndsley began to worry that Bert would ruin everything. Bert's only part was to play the final note of the final piece of music. How awful, Houndsley thought, to end the evening with a crash. Pages are stuck. But when the last note came, it was not a crash or a clash or a boom or a bang. It was the closest that cymbals can come to silence. It sounded like a chime in the wind. It lingered and floated and fell into the quiet time. Great literary language again. For a long while, no one spoke. No one moved. Everyone just sat and listened to the silence. Some may have even dreamed. When they finally started making their way home, Catina asked, "May I stay at your house tonight, Houndsley?" "May I stay too?" asked Bert. "Of course," said Houndsley. Thinking about the refreshments they had forgotten to take to the concert, he added, "We may have to eat a lot of cookies." Catina and Bert didn't mind. Eating cookies would be a perfect way to share the quiet time together. And that was the story. That is a very sweet story. I enjoyed reading that very much. I learned that it's okay to have quiet time. I can turn off my TV. I can turn off my computer. I can put my phone in a different room. And I can just read or play board games and just enjoy the peace and quiet. So I'm going to challenge you today. Can you enjoy some peace and quiet and put those devices and those electronics away and just be present? All right. Thank you for listening to Houndsley and Catina and the Quiet Time, and I hope you have a great weekend.